Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
For the record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Today is Wednesday, the 6th day of June 2018. I trust that everyone had an enjoyable evening. No precipitation, no rain, not in the Savannah area. Didn't see any wet roads in Georgetown, and I didn't see any wet roads in West Bay other than the Yacht Club roundabout, and that was as a result of a water truck cleaning the area there where I think dump trucks are going in and out, and there is usually some debris left on the road. So no rain, but we're thankful for whatever type of weather we're able to enjoy as well. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. Of course, you know For the Record is a show produced by the staff and the management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I am your host, Orit Connor, and you're welcome to join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Phone lines are always open. There is always someone there waiting to take your calls. 9 times out of 10, it is going to be that beautiful Cayman Brack radio voice of Miss Susan Watson. You can call us on our toll-free number, provided courtesy of Flo. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. If you don't like to talk on the telephone, you can email us at fortherecord. That is one word, for the record, at candw.ky. And of course, we have our WhatsApp number. That number is 925-3261, where you can leave a voice note or send us a text message. We won't answer that number. And if you leave a voice note, then the contents of that voice note will be played over there as well. I constantly hear people say sometimes, I tried to get in, but I couldn't get it on the phone. When you're having difficulty getting on those other numbers, just call the 925-3261, and in your own good time, you can say exactly what it is that you want to say, unless there's a question that you have and you want an answer for it. And even with that, you can pose that question on the WhatsApp number, and we will try to answer it as well. Now, today, no one in the studio yet. I believe Mr. Kenneth Bryan is scheduled to be in this morning, so we're expecting him. Yes, as a matter of fact, I just got a message from him saying that he's 3 minutes away, so he'll be here. So before he gets here, very quickly, let's see what's happening with our neighbors in the Caribbean as well. Jamaica, we spoke earlier about the fact that you have to dial 10 digits now in Jamaica because they're running out of numbers. And I see something very interesting, and would be useful to know what the government policy here in the Cayman Islands is in regards to this. The Minister for Health, Dr. Christopher Tufton, has announced that starting in January of 2019, sugary drinks will be restricted in schools. So he made that in making his contribution to the sectorial debate in the House of Representatives. He pointed out that the policy will restrict certain types. Said that the policy will restrict certain types of sugary drinks in schools, and is part of an effort to reduce obesity. And we see where obesity throughout the world, the whole issue of obesity is raising its head, and we're having more and more obese persons now than we had before. Of course, many people become couch potatoes now that you have all of these electronic devices that can be used. You can give commands to your television set, to whatever, and you don't have to do much. So we have less and less physical activity, and more bad habits, I would say, until I can find a better word, bad habits. So the whole issue of obesity, if you're familiar with the school lunches, school cafeterias, if you're involved in it, send us a message. Give us a call and tell us whether or not we have a policy there, or whether or not people just on a conscious basis try to ensure that there are healthy foods, less sugary drinks that are served to our children in our schools here. Very interesting to know if that is the case in the Cayman Islands as well. One of our online publications has also raised something, and it is extremely good to know that people are monitoring the international scene, and in particular what happens in the UK. I think people are much more conscious of what's happening in the UK as far as the legislation is concerned, now that we had that situation whereby the UK has indicated that they will legislate for the Cayman Islands if we do not pass legislation and introduce public registers of beneficial ownership of companies here in the Cayman Islands. So there is some action afoot to amend the British Nationality Act 1981, and the reason for that amendment to the act is because of the European Human Rights Court making a ruling in relation to discrimination, and also the Supreme Court in the UK making a ruling in that regard as well. I will give you more details about it now. I'm basically just trying to paraphrase it because I spent part of last night reading over the details of it, and the UK's Select Committee that is dealing with it. And it is the UK Parliament's Joint Select Committee on Human Rights. And like I said, there are some changes afoot to the British Nationality Act that will take place. I will go into more details later. But of course, as you know, the British Nationality Act also contains, like we've said before, we have our local legislation that allows us to grant residency, work permits, Caymanian status, but Caymanian status is not a nationality. The only nationalities that we have two of them. We have the British Overseas Territories citizenship, and we also have British citizenship. Both of those citizenships are governed by the British Nationality Act 1981. So any changes in there could possibly affect us as well. So it is something that I will do more research on. We will talk more about it as well. There are indications I've seen where they've said when it comes to the overseas territories in this regard, that the UK will be consulting with the overseas territories. I saw where, one of our online publications tried to make hay of that situation as well. And when they introduced the conversation into it, apparently they tried to get the Premier on Monday to give comments about it. Now, I know reporters have their job to do, and whenever you get a leader of government and you find yourself in a position that you can ask questions, you try to ask as many as possible, and they may not be relevant to what the Premier or whatever leader may be, where they may be at that point in time. In this case, the Premier was actually on the lawn of the Glass House, where we were celebrating 60 years of our coat of arms, and was approached, and the paper said something about the Premier angrily retorting, to the question that was raised. And I would say there's a time and a place for everything, and on Monday out there may not have been the time to talk about that. We want to talk about the celebration, talk about the coat of arms. But at the same time, I also recognize that reporters don't necessarily get that many opportunities to have a face-to-face with a leader of government, so they try to take advantage of it whenever they can. Of course, you can send questions in to the Premier's office. His press secretary, I'm sure, will liaise and try to get responses back to you. But it was amazing that the publication had to speak about the way that the Premier retorted to it, rather than just simply saying, we were unable to get a response, from him. But that's something that I'm sure people will talk about as well. We're going to take a commercial break now. When we return, Mr. Brian is in the studio with us, and he doesn't really need any introduction, but I will still introduce him as a part, of the format that we have here on For the Record. So, folks, please stay tuned. For the Record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, MLA Mr. Kenneth Bryan. Mr. Bryan, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC. Thank you so much for having me once again here in the studios. And I would like to say good morning to the lovely Miss Susan, who is, like you said, that beautiful Cayman Brack voice is always behind the scenes in the radio. Yes. I want to say a special good morning to everyone in the Cayman Islands, but also particularly my people that I represent, which is everybody, but those who selected me to be their representative, the people of Georgetown Central. And a special good morning to those in Cayman Brack. I love you. I'm a half Cayman Brack, so I got to send them a little bit of love. And the other 3/4 is Georgetown, if you make those math add up now. So that being said, it's a pleasure to be here. I got a few things I want to speak about this morning. We know that the next Parliament sitting is coming up on the 27th of this month. Got a few things that we plan to address in Parliament. A few things that have been happening in the community that I'm concerned about. There's a lot of things that I'm concerned about, but some things I'm going to mention this morning.
Okay.
And also get to hear from some of the listening audience as if there's any concerns that they want to speak to me about.
Precisely. Okay, go right ahead.
Okay. Well, one of the first things is through my community efforts recently, I've been noticing a trend of concerns that have been brought to my attention by a large number of my voters, and it has to do with senior employment and the difficulties that they are facing. And this boards more with the industry of construction. Also, you know that we come from a field of pretty good trades individuals. And when I say Caymanians, I mean all Caymanians, regardless if you're a status Caymanian or generational Caymanian. When I say Caymanian, I mean all Caymanians. And what we have is a lot of those individuals who have trades in plumbing, masonry, carpentry, roofing, and the like. We are currently having a construction boom, which is a good thing. But as a result of that, I'm still finding it difficult to find out why there's so many persons who are senior who are still capable to do the work that is necessary in the construction field, but they're being excluded or not given an opportunity. And I think it has a lot to do with the medical insurance issues that we're having here in the Cayman Islands. Because when I examine them from my own personal standpoint, we know, and I think all of us probably know that strapping senior man that you go, man, he's 60 years old, but he can lift up a house. You know what I'm saying? And they're quite capable of doing anything that a 25-year-old can do in respect to the skill set, and probably can do it a lot better because they have had the wisdom and experience of being in the trade for so long. But I continue to hear the difficulty for them to find work in a construction boom. And I'm starting to see that some of the complaints that they're getting is, companies are asking them if they have their own insurance, or whenever they want to be hired, the insurance element comes up. And I think what is happening is a lot of the companies do not want to take on the cost of insurance for senior individuals in any employment.
If they can get insurance.
If they can get insurance.
It's a possibility they may not be able to.
But this is a disadvantage to those individuals, because I know many hardy, strong Caymanians who are still capable of doing the work of their trade, and then be excluded and discriminated against because of insurance. And it goes to the heart of the problem of the cost of health insurance in the Cayman Islands. Now, a lot of the members of the Legislative Assembly all campaigned on the heavy cost of living in this country. And one of the prime things of that is cost of goods and services, and particularly health insurance. But we've been 1 year in now, that's 25% of your term, and we still haven't seen any effects or changes to affect that cost, or trying to assist seniors who are finding it difficult to pay for insurance, or even to get coverage, period. Because there's some insurance companies who outright just aren't willing to insure them. And that is now causing difficulty for those seniors to continue work. So they already have.
And this is usually, we're talking about medical insurance.
Medical insurance.
So
yes.
so let's say, for instance, if a person is already have insurance through the SHIC program, the
basic plan.
Basic plan, right? So they have that. That wouldn't be sufficient for an employer to say, well, at least they have insurance, so I don't have to worry about insurance. I'll give them a job, even if it's part-time or what, because they have insurance coverage from Synoco.
Well, that's if they have their own insurance. Yes, I mean, of course, any insurance, they will be abiding by the labor law.
But most people have it now, even for, and I hate to use this word, but for the indigent and everyone, almost everyone's covered.
Well, I mean, if you're then indigent, then you wouldn't be looking for work, because in order for you to be indigent, then you wouldn't be able to be qualified.
Okay.
So
if you're cake and eat it.
Yeah, you can't have a cake and eat it too. Okay. So if you're looking for employment, chances are you have to have your own private insurance, and usually you don't pay for your own insurance and say to the employer, listen, no, don't worry, I got my own coverage. Usually it's you working for a company, and the company provides that insurance. Now, if you happen to have coverage by way, say, of spouse or what have you, or you're a retired civil servant and you continue to have insurance, those are special circumstances. But in most cases, a person will have their health insurance moving from job to job, trade to trade, and the like. so not only are they having the discrimination or the difficulty of finding employment because of their age and because of the concern or the interpretation that after you get a certain age that you can't do the work anymore, they're also being discriminated against in respect to their health coverage. And I think that it's something that has to be taken seriously, because unlike a younger individual who has the time or the luxury of time, God's willing, to fight through the difficulty of the discrimination and trying to find a job and moving from or depending on somebody else, most seniors don't have that luxury. And as we all know, and I think that most of us would agree, that the pension plans that are available for seniors, those who are retiring around now, aren't very strong unless you're a civil servant, and even a civil servant at a high post as well, I'd say, because our pension is still and it's
relatively young.
Young, exactly. Yes, yeah. It's very, very young at this stage. So we know that even if those persons said, okay, you know what, I can't get work, I might as well just call it a day and retire, they can't even afford to do that. So I bring it up because I want those persons to know that I see it, I understand it, and I'm concerned about it for you as well. And I'm trying to find out ways and means of us assisting these individuals, whether it's me trying to convince the government to say, listen, persons who are that have this as a hurdle for them to get work, whether we offer up insurance for them independently, so that's not another hurdle that employers will deter them from giving them work. But if these companies are seeing that as an issue, at the end of the day, whatever issue is causing the employers not to hire them, we need to rectify it, either by forcing the companies to hire these individuals or assisting the companies to say, what is the problem?
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult to force them to hire.
I know. But some days you feel like, I'll be honest with you, I'm a legislator. And I'm thankful for the opportunity by the people of the Cayman Islands, particularly that of Georgetown Central. But some days you think to yourself, these people are just being unreasonable. The employers are not giving these individuals a chance. Now, OC, you come from what I call is the wise school. You know many tradespersons who are those types that gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning before the sun get up. And they're to sleep as soon as the sun goes down, because that's the routine. All they know is that life, and they work very, very hard. They're structured. They eat manly food, and they just hardcore work. And then those persons still can't get work in a construction boom. And I'm waiting actually on a Freedom of Information request on some figures of how many work permits we have in the construction field, because I don't think that we have the stats and the data, or the person, unfortunately, not taking a stab at the premier, but he's the person responsible for labor. But nobody's speaking about the data related to how many persons we have in the trade field, in a field that there's a lot of work going on, but still there's a lot of unemployed Caymanians. I'd be surprised if I actually called for a meeting today of how many persons who have trade in construction who are unemployed today, and you'd be surprised. And we shouldn't be having this problem at this stage.
What you would want, you may want to look into also, because there is no age requirement when it comes to work permit, applying for a work permit.
True.
So you may want to ask for a breakdown in age groups of all persons on work work permit and categories as well.
That's a good question. That's a good thought.
Then you'll see whether or not we have people in that age group who are on work permits, but yet Caymanians can't get work as well. Folks, we're going to our 8 o'clock news. Please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back with Mr. Kenneth Bryan immediately after the news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, MLA Mr. Kenneth Bryan. Going to throw the mic right back over to Mr. Kenneth Bryan.
Thank you so much, OC. Mr. Corner, or should I say?
That's okay. OC's fine.
So we were speaking about the difficulty that I am recognizing or starting to see as a trend with senior individuals continuing to find work when we know that they're quite capable to do the job, and recognizing that some of the elements that are associated with them having the difficulty to find work, even when there is work, has to do with insurance, as well as being the normal discrimination against Caymanians in the first place. Because I think we've all in this country recognized that there's levels of discrimination against Caymanians because of this leverage that is given to employers to have over a work permit holder than you can have over a Caymanian. And for a long time, we've all accepted that many people see it as an advantage to have a work permit holder, because you kind of have like a little noose around their neck that in the event that they step out of the line, so to speak, you can put a little tug on that, unlike a Caymanian where they have rights and don't have to stand for some of the mistreatment that we know is within the employment market. And when I say that, I'm not speaking about all employers, but unfortunately that 5% puts a bad stigma on a lot of the good employers. And for those good employers, continue to do your part. It is amazing that you do that, and you are the one that keeps this country in a positive manner. But again, along with the regular discrimination which I just spoke about, and now an added problem for many of those seniors is the difficulty of finding work because of health insurance. Now, I only bring it up because I want people to know that I'm aware of it. I'm just trying to figure out how to fight it, because besides being the minister and taking an action, like say for instance those persons who find it difficult to get insurance, and if they see that is a hindrance for them, and offer up some sort of outside program whereby they can get their own insurance, which will not be another hurdle for employers if that's genuinely what's stopping them from getting work. I'm not sure how else to address the problem. But I just want people to recognize that I see it.
Do you think this new human resources department that's being established and everything else, you may want to talk to the director,
yes,
interim director of that as well, to see whether or not they have anything in mind or are going to seek to address similar issues as well.
Yes, and that's the appropriate thing to do. But I'll say this, Mr. Connor. My concern and my worry is that for administration after administration, director after director, is this common perception that employers are not doing this, that we're not accepting the fact that there are bad employers out there who are doing malicious things, because I've yet to see where there's a strong approach to addressing the nasty labor behavior of employers. Mm-hmm. Now, there's nasty behavior of employees as well, but we're not talking about that right now. We can't ignore that as well, because there may be a cause and effect. Of course, we can't ignore it. By all means, I'm not suggesting that there is employers. They may go hand in hand at times. You may have bad employers who give employees, when I say bad, I mean, those, with poor work ethics, mm-hmm. Don't show up on time, or don't at the last minute call and say, I can't make it. Yes. You have employers have a business to run as well, and those employers who have had bad experiences like that, and I'm not justifying what they do, but those who have had bad experience. But I believe that the director, the interim director of that unit, have publicly stated that they recognize that these things are happening, and that is why they're going to address them. And I say that to you, and I know you're skeptical about government after government, but that is what you have to work with now. Oh, I agree. By all means, I'm not going to skip that process. That process has to be done. You have to dot all your I's and cross all your T's, because I have to give them the opportunity to say that. But to say that I am excited to hear what they're going to say, I'm not. I'm being honest with you, because I've been disappointed so many times, and many people have also. But I am happy with the interim director. I am pleased in respect to what I know about that person, right?
Okay.
So
Let's grab this phone call. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. Good morning, caller. Welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning.
Morning, Doc. How are you?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I think that it's in terms of whether or not we have a new government between new members of the Legislative Assembly and the Cabinet, or whether or not we have a new director of a labor institution or an agency that should be interested in labor. We have always a constant dynamic, and I think Kenneth is experiencing that or sensing that, even if the formulations might not necessarily be what I think they should be. He sensed that there is no change and that there is no desire for those persons that have power to empower those persons that don't have power to be able to benefit from the progress in the society. When you come to that kind of realization, and then you realize that the language that people use is really an attempt to divert energies from defining the real challenges we have and creating solutions to it. The Legislative Assembly, unfortunately, is like in a vacuum. They put there, and they are somehow not connected to the power in the society. The government is an agency that has its personnel and it has its other resources, but those resources are not to actually solve the problems or attempt to solve the problems of those people who are disconnected to any of the power bases in society. One of the most important bases in society is, of course, the economy, the employment. If you're disconnected from employment, your life becomes like miserable. And he's caught with kinds of people who have been disconnected for quite a long time now. It's a terrible thing to know that you're representing people, you know what the problem is, and there are people there in the Legislative Assembly, in government, who understand exactly what these problems are, and they do nothing to help you carry the ball forward. Mm-hmm. It should be that somebody says, regardless of who is articulating these needs that are in the community, that people who at least have some claim to political power use that political power to restructure aspects of the economy that will allow people to feed from what is there. Mm-hmm. The most terrible thing, I think, psychologically, is to know that this country brags about its wealth, brags about how it should save wealth for the wealthy, but cannot talk about how it should save pride for the poor, how we should give them the empowerment which is necessary to begin again to feel like their Cayman belong to them, or they have a certain right to own something. Just owning the word Cayman is not enough. They need to own a little piece of the pie of the ability to be able to sustain themselves. And Kenny comes on radio time and time again, bringing a message about desolation, how alienated, how powerless our people feel. And none of those members of the Legislative Assembly are willing to take up his battles and to support him in these battles, because he doesn't use the same old kind of hypocritical, misleading languages that a bunch of them are using. And it's time that people stop patronizing our communities and start doing something about empowering our people, not just the young ones, but the old ones as well. In those communities, there are people that are really so separated from the resources that it's a shame that the government that they have trust in for so many years and the people that they have voted for so many years cannot see that we can do things differently. I was at a meeting in Rock Hole where Inspector Butch brought people together talking about police, community policing. And it's so interesting that the communities could rally around different things if people would just make the resources available for them.
Thank you very much for that, Doc. Thank you, brother. Now, in all fairness, we have heard Dr. McPhail squarely lays this issue on the shoulders of members of the Legislative Assembly. But at the same time, we have heard persons like Mr. MLA Alvasuku, MLA Chris Saunders express their concerns about the employment situation. You don't think that when they speak about the unemployed Caymanians, that it also includes those in the age bracket that you're talking about now?
I'm assuming so.
Okay.
I'm assuming that you have to, whenever you give an employment figure, it has to do with everybody who's able to work but can't find work for some reason or another. So yes.
Yeah. But you have specifically focused on those.
Yes.
That
seniors in that age
seniors,
group,
yeah.
because obviously the reasoning behind why the younger ones are not working may be another discriminatory reason as well, or just a reason where they're not skilled yet to do so. But at the end of the day, there's less reasons, in my view, for seniors who have the skill set and the experience and still have the capability to do the work, why they shouldn't be getting work. So there always seems to be a reason why a Caymanian can't get the job, because we know there's more jobs than there are Caymanians. So somebody coming up with some sort of sob story as to why a Cayman can't get it. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some Caymanians that, like every other country in the world, that they're just not wanting to work, and they give and they're good on your job site, and that's fair, and I understand that. But when I come here, I don't come to this show to say I'm going to be speaking about that person who I know. Yeah, he went down to 15 different jobs in every employer he went to. He didn't want to show up to work, or he drunk, or he missed 15 sick days and within the first 2 weeks. I'm not talking about that individual. I'm talking about, and remember I said to you, Mr. Corner, you come from a very wise school. Some of these people I'm speaking about could have been your classmates who come from that school of thought where, listen, you work hard, you be honest, and you give your best, and God will provide for you. And they cannot find work. And those are the Caymanians that I know who built the rock that we live on and the economy that we have today, and they still can't get an opportunity. It's not right.
Yeah, I mean, I heard a very uplifting story the other day. I was talking to someone who was telling me that his brother was building some apartments for his brother, the Caymanians, building some apartments for another Caymanian, and pointed out, the plumbers who he has on the job, they're from, West Bay, the electrician, a George Towner, the guy who does the painting and stuff like that. So this particular employer
prides himself
in hiring
yes.
all Caymanians, for the job. We have to take a commercial break. We have a caller as well. Folks, please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, I'm Mr. Kenneth Bryan, and we were initially talking about unemployed Caymanians, especially those in a particular age group who would normally be around the retirement age. Interesting. While we were on that topic, I was wondering how could I introduce this morning, and the topic that Mr. Bryan brought up allowed this to fit right into, what they call segue, right into it. Caymanian waitress describes Guatemala eruption aftermath. That's in the Caymanian Compass, written by Mr. James Whitaker. And it talks about this lady. And I'm not going to focus on the disruption, and our prayers and our sympathies go out to those who have lost loved ones in that eruption. But here is a lady traveling with her partner and her child in Guatemala, had been working in the Cayman Islands, and now are going to spend 6 months traveling the world, traversing the globe. I wouldn't call it globe trotting, but maybe globe trotting as well. And I'm going to read here, because I don't want to misrepresent. It says she spoke about the grounds and cause. We realized it was volcanic gas, blah blah blah. It says she's a Cayman Islands waitress and former Caymanian Compass reporter who is currently traveling the world with her 2-year-old daughter. And somewhere in the article, it indicates that after the 6 months of traveling, she's coming back to the Cayman Islands. Now, I can only assume, that this person must have permanent residence. If they're on a work permit, then is that job reserved for them when they come back for 6 months, going to travel for 6 months? Does she have to apply for another work permit?
She sounds like she's guaranteed that job.
The big question, and it goes to show you what people keep talking about the tourism industry, because she's a waitress now, right? A reporter, from a reporter to a waitress. It speaks loudly to either what are the salaries that are reporters that work for newspapers in the Cayman Islands, what are they like, what are they getting, or is it really, really that good in the tourism sector, in the service industry? And we hear people saying it all along, that is where people make their money. So here is a person, and like I said, it didn't indicate here whether or not she has permanent residence. But if she's on a work permit, travel the world for 6 months and come back, and your job is there waiting for you again. What an irony. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Good morning. Fine. How are you, sir?
Good morning, my good colleague.
Good morning. I don't make it a point of duty to call in when other MLAs are on, because I think I
do it all the time. Don't worry.
I know, that's right. Yeah, I know.
Give him a taste of his own medicine.
I know, but no, the thing about it is, which I just want to touch on, is that we need to look at the underlying issues that are creating the problems. When we're talking about the unemployment among the seniors and the elderly in Cayman, we can't not look at healthcare costs, because whether we want to recognize it or not, the reality is many businesses discriminate against the older Caymanians simply because they do not want to be paying the $1,400, $1,500, $1,600 a month in healthcare premiums.
Agreed.
I mean, that's the reality. So this is one of the reasons why we have been pushing to get some level of universal healthcare coverage, where at a minimum, when a person leaves from one employer to a next, I mean, even if you're young and you have a pre-existing condition, it's very hard for you to change jobs, because you may go to a new employer who may not be able to secure insurance for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So the healthcare is definitely an issue, and I know there are businesses that factor those things into consideration when hiring people, especially if you're a small business, because not many businesses can afford those level of premiums. And when you recognize that roughly 70% of our workforce is still employed by small businesses or small to medium businesses, those costs are definitely an issue to deal with. The second issue we need to look at when we come on to our younger people, and even to some extent our older people also, is cheap labor. Some work permits are too cheap. You know, you look at a pool attendant, the jobs that are entry level for kids coming out of school, $375 for that work permit. That's $1.02 a day in revenue to the government. It is not worth it to keep people out of work who want to work just to make a few dollars to feel like they're some part of society. You know, we have, some costs of these work permits are not worth it for the government when it comes on to what it is that they're making. And again, unless we want to employ the market system to say where Caymanian laborers are available for those jobs, the work permit should reflect it. So it's not just a matter of let's charge 600 or 1,200 because that's what we think the market can take. If Caymanians are available for those jobs, first of all, there should be no work permit. And secondly, if there should be a work permit, it should be in the thousands of dollars to discourage people and encourage people to hire more Caymanians.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, our people cannot compete against cheap labor.
Yep.
You know, you have permits out there that cost $1,200, and then you got these people there. They can't complain. They can't do anything. You have basically locked them in for life. You have an employee there for life. I mean, well, at least up to 7 years or whatever before rollover that you don't have to give a pay increase to. And if they want to leave, guess what? They will need a release letter or something from you. Or you can go to immigration and turn a permit in if they give you too much lip. I mean, this is the problem that we have within our society. We want to run capitalism, but at the end of the day, we're not allowing the market system to work because more than 50% of the labor force is controlled by employers through the work permit system. And when you get up and you mention unions, people go crazy. I mean, so this is about us coming on and changing the collective view of how people see things. You know, I mean, the reality of it, this is a merchant class society. People talk about businesses having control. I mean, over $2 million declared in the last election as legitimate expenses between nomination to election day. That's only what was declared. Then you're not talking about what was spent previously to even nomination day. I mean, you're talking about millions of dollars being spent in an election that some may consider local, but no one is asking where the money is coming from. But when you see policies can't change, and we have all of these conflicted people sitting on all these government boards that we know are conflicted and shouldn't be there, we still turn a blind eye to it because, you know what, that's the political favors that we have. People basically put money inside the system and corrupt in the process. So unless we're prepared to really take on the powers that be in this country, we want to be sitting here over and over and over having the same problem. Because the people who are basically getting messed up in all of this are the ones who don't have money. Gentlemen, I'm not going to leave you, I'm not going to take up too much time, but I'm going to leave it this quote from Machiavelli, which I think really brings it home in terms of what is the point I'm trying to make.
And that's from The Prince, right?
Yeah, part of it. Yeah, you wrote The Prince. The most difficult challenge in the history of human affairs is to change the established order of things. Because those who would be disadvantaged by the change are certain of their loss. And those who would benefit from the change are uncertain of their gain.
Yes.
You know, I mean, this is the challenge that we have, and we need to go out, as Dr. Frank and many others before me and Kenneth have said, is to empower the people. But at the same time, the people need to recognize that we live in an age, this is the information age, you need to get information.
Okay.
You need to understand what is happening out there.
Thank you very much for that, Chris.
Huh?
Thank you very much for that. We've got to cut you off there now.
Good.
Cut you off.
Yeah, man, no problem.
Okay.
I just want to say thanks to my colleague there, Mr. Christopher Saunders, for his input. I really do appreciate it. Unless we have another call, I can go on to my next topic.
I think we have another caller,
Yes.
right?
No.
I thought we had a call. Sorry. Okay.
Another matter I want to take up, and before I just go on to the next one, I want to, for those persons who are listening, I want them to know that I'm not only speaking about the construction industry in respect to this problem, because it goes further than that. I have, but I just find a commonality amongst the construction industry because they're always jumping from site to site and project to project. So it's more obvious through them. But there is still a lot of senior Caymanians who are either secretaries, administrators, and the like, whatever skill set that they have. And there's this forced retirement element. They've still got legal obligations by way of mortgages and the like, and still are capable to do so. And there's a lot of senior Caymanians who are going through this, and the problem, like Chris has said, has to do with the cost of health care. Is one of the hurdles, and a very big one, I say, a very costly one. Then there's other minor discrimination elements of Caymanians in respect to it's easier to hold a work permit holder in line of labor, so to speak, when you have them on work permit. But I want to move on from that. And it's actually, the next topic is quite similar. What I am also experiencing in respect to persons coming to me complaining about labor issues And for those who are listening, you probably hear me speak a lot about labor. And the reason you'll continue to hear me speak a lot about labor is for me, I think labor is probably one of the most important issues outside of education in this country because labor is connected to money. We need money to survive and live and feed ourselves and take care of our loved ones. So labor is a very big deal. And when persons like Dr. Frank McField has said earlier, when a person has been excluded from the system and cannot provide for themselves through labor, it's like they feel like they're purposeless. So hence the reason I would focus on labor a lot. Now moving on to the topic. What I am getting as a complaint as well is Caymanians who work in the service industry, and it is not necessarily only the service industry, it could be the construction industry as well, where you have an economy or an industry or a trade where work goes up and down. It's not steady all the time where it's a 9 to 5 kind of an office job. And sometimes employers have to make the choice to say, okay, work has cut back a little bit. I have 10 employees, but I only have work this 2 months or this week or this 3 weeks for 8 employees. And I'm going to use this as an example so people can get where I'm going with this. Mm-hmm. But you have 10 employees, 5 of them are work permit holders, and the other 5 are Caymanian. So when that work moves from about 10 employees worth of work down to only 8, the employer has to cut back. So what they say, okay, well, I need to cut back some hours. And they in the normal process, and I've heard it over and over and over again, the hours that are cut back are always on the Caymanian, never on the work permit holder.
Because I guess the Caymanian can 6 months globe trotting. Visiting volcanoes.
Exactly. And there seems to always be the Caymanian being cut short. And you don't want to involve yourself as a government too much into employee-employer relationships and be a dictator type of approach. Mm-hmm. But when you have persons bringing this to your attention to say an employer is choosing to cut the hours of the Caymanian rather than the work permit holder, who is your priority to? You're supposed to be making sure that the Caymanian can survive. A lady told me just yesterday, she said that the employers looked to her and said they have bills to pay.
So the Caymanian doesn't have bills?
That's exactly what I said. I said, I guess the Caymanians don't have any bills either. And it shows you where their priority is at. And I think, now, obviously, I'm a young legislator in a matter of things. But if I was in that position, I would be considering something to the like that it's mandatory that if there's ever cut hours, the hours have to be cut from the work permit holder. And matter of fact, if anybody who's listening and you have experienced this exact same thing as a Caymanian, please call me and let me know. Because I want to know. Those employers who do that should be ashamed of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to take a commercial break now. Folks, please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, MLA, Mr. Kenneth Bryan.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. I'm going to move my attention now to another concern that I have. I mentioned it on my social media feed the other day in respect to certain entities that are not subject to the labor law. And I unfortunately figured this out just about a month ago and didn't even realize. I just spoke to you, OC, and I don't think you recognized it either until
No,
recently.
wasn't aware of it.
According to our labor market, there is 3 entities in this country that are not three entities are not subject to the labor law. Now, but before I explain what those 3 entities are, let's talk about what's the purpose of a labor law. A labor law is a governing document to govern the relationship between employees and employers and what is the accepted standard within our nation as how that those behaviors should act from a moral and a legal perspective. That's what a labor law is. Now, what I come to find out that there's the three entities that are not subject to those moral and legal obligations of that relationship is one, the civil service, charities, and churches. Now, let me address the first one because I don't think the first one should be within this criticism that I'm about to get to.
Because they have their separate legislation.
Because they have their separate legislation. And within that separate legislation, they're required to meet the very minimum standard or above of what the labor law currently has. So by all means, they're meeting all the requirements that is necessary. So the private sector, so the civil service is excluded from this discussion. Mm-hmm. The other two is charities and churches. And I'll give you an example of charities. Because as much as this may sound really nice, a charity in a church, first thing you come to your mind is good-hearted persons and great people and standing for the right thing. That's the first thing that comes to your mind. But unfortunately, the way the world works, that's not always the case. But let's talk about some of the charities and churches that we think about, because they too are employers, and they too could potentially not do the right thing that is expected by all of us in society. You have the Pines. You have Humane Society. You have Jack and Jill Nursery, which is that deals with kids. All of these registered charities, and then obviously you know every one of the churches, and some of these churches are rather big, and they could be up to 5 to 10 persons who are working and getting a salary through the church. I was currently investigating one particular charity. I'm not going to call the name yet but I will be calling the name in the near future. So I'm assuming that that charity will be twitching this morning because they know I'm coming, and we've had this discussion
you're
already.
Discuss that when you have parliamentary privilege.
You know what's going on. Anyway, so I had some complaints by some of the employees about some practices within that charity, and the concern was them asking the employees to sign a document to say that they will not be required to accept time and a half if they work overtime. And I said, that don't sound right. That can't be right. So I called the labor department and said, can you force an employee to sign a document to say if they work overtime that the entity doesn't have to pay overtime? They said, no, that's against the labor law. I said, all right, good. Feeling good as an investigator now. I'm protecting my people. Now, that's just one matter, and I'm not going to go into the other ones. I'm just going to give you one example of the behaviors of these charities. Mm-hmm. I get there and I speak to the director, and she says, I'm sorry, Kenneth. We're not subject to the labor law, so regardless of what the labor law says, we can get them to sign it, and it's not a problem. Matter of fact, my board approved it. That's the exact words the woman looked at me and said. Mm-hmm. And I said, the attitude of being so bold with it as to say, it may don't sound good, but I'm allowed to do it. The part that bothers me the most is not that people are doing it, but the problem is that the government has been aware of this problem for quite some time. Because I spoke to the department, I said, how can you tell me, and when I say the department, I'm talking about the labor department, I said, how can you tell me the charity that employs individuals cannot be subject to the labor regulations that we in this country together believe everybody should be operating on? What makes them any more special to not be subject to the same labor regulations than you and I? She said, Kenneth, we've brought this to the attention of the minister and the last administration, and they all know about it, and we've asked them to change it. And we all know, see, that there has been labor changes to the labor law in the last administration. Why was that not one of them? And I'm concerned, and I'm going to call out today, and this is nothing to do with past history, but simple fact is he is the labor minister now, the Honorable Alden McLaughlin. And I want him to publicly tell me and the country why are charities not subject to the labor law? Why are churches not subject to the labor law? Churches can violate human beings just like anybody else. Now, there is an expectation that they should do the right thing, and most do. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like they're not persons who would do wrong. Just because they're a charity, just because they're a church, sorry, I don't trust everybody. I'm here to protect my people, and this should be in law already. And to know that the department told the government they were concerned about it, and they're recommending, remember now, they're the specialists in labor, and they say, we need to fix this. It's a problem. Mm-hmm. And you mean to tell me it hasn't? Okay, forget the fact that they didn't do it last administration. Something happened, a lot of business stuff. Why hasn't it meet the agenda yet? It's been 1 year in.
I guess there's a question also whether or not that policy is compatible with the Bill of Rights as well, because it's it's discriminating. You have two different class of workers: those who are subjected,
100% right,
and
OC.
those who are not subjected.
Yes,
to it. It'll be an interesting thing to explore.
To be honest with you, I'm gonna be saying this and just to highlight a little matter. Mm-hmm. If my investigations go any further than in what I believe should be right, I'll be calling for the resignation of the person who is in charge of this charity, and I'll be calling for the board members to say a public apology, simply because the law states that you're not subject to the labor law.
Doesn't mean that you should take advantage of people.
Exactly.
Yes. Exactly.
That's so you're basically saying because the law allows you, it's morally wrong. Nobody else is allowed to do it, but because whether it's a mistake or oversight by government, you say, well, I don't have to do it. So you're willing to look at a worker and say, I'm going to work you more than normal, but I'm not going to pay you.
Does this entity receive government funding as well?
They do.
Okay.
That's compiling the situation. So matter of fact, government actually funds most of their funding, if not more than 50%.
Yeah, I would imagine that the historical, and this doesn't make it right, but the historical, from a historical perspective, it probably meant because of them having limited funds, the mere fact that they have to rely on donations and things of that nature, that is why they would have given them that exemption of short. I could see it in relation to the hiring, of people, but when it comes to treating those classes of persons different than people are treated in the public and the private sector, I don't think that is justifiable at all.
None. I mean, here's the other factor that I've considered before we go to the next break, right? Is that, okay, maybe there's some level of benefits to the charity for them not to be subject to the labor law. Like, say, for instance, if you're not subject to the labor law, maybe you don't have to pay for work permits or something like that. Mm-hmm. You don't want to try to put a burden on the charity for a work permit or these other hurdles that make it difficult. But not to do with the relationship of the agreement of the labor agreement. You can't say that, okay, I'll give you another example. A person was let go, given one reason to be let go, and it's the same entity, say, we no longer need your services today. We've cut back because of money purposes. And then the next week, when the person decides to say, I'm going to go try to find a job somewhere else, and unfortunately this is a work permit holder, so the strength of it is not as strong, but it's an example, because if it's a Cayman, totally different strength. But when the person tries to go find another job, they get a letter from an immigration from the same entity saying, actually, we let her go for a different reason. So you let somebody go, you lie to them about one reason, and then you tell the immigration department a different thing. That should be against the law as well.
Okay, folks, we're going to our 9 o'clock headline news. Please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, MLA Mr. Kenneth Bryan.
Thank you again, OC. I'm just going to move on to one more topic because I think I summed up my concern there in respect to the labor with the two entities of churches and charities. and the concern of them not being subject to the labor law, and how severe that is, and what I expect the government to be addressing, and how soon they will plan to address it, because I know they're aware of it. So hopefully persons who are listening before we went to the break, because I don't want to reiterate that again. I want to move on to my last subject of the day before I just go ahead and invite persons to give calls in, and this one is going to be rather quick. OC, as you know, sometimes Caymanians find themselves not in a financial position, but they have difficulties with their homes. Like, say, for instance, a senior person may have a leak in their roof, but can't afford to fix it. And normally there is provisions available within the budget to assist persons with home repairs. Now, unfortunately, and I'm just talking about my constituency and the surrounding constituencies of mine in Georgetown, I can only imagine that there must be a lot more persons in the other districts as well. But I know there's a lot of Caymanians in my area. A lot of these types of persons in this situation in Georgetown itself. So I've been learning how the process works for a person to apply for that assistance. And for a Caymanian out there who may be listening, if you're having difficulty with your home, you own it, you may be senior and you can't afford to fix it, but it is causing your life, or the way you live your life, to be in turmoil. Like, say, for instance, sleeping in the house with a leaking roof, particularly with hurricane season.
Health challenges.
Or health challenges.
Yes,
good way to describe that. Thank you. Normally, what you would do if you wanted assistance is go through the needs assessment unit, and you were basically asking them for assistance with home repairs. And what normally happens is they assess your financial position to decide whether or not can you not afford this for yourself. Once that part is done and they've deemed that, okay, yes, you're not in the financial position to deal with this yourself, they then send a report to a committee that deals with housing repairs. And based on your circumstances, the severity of it, whether you have children there, you have a severe disability, they put a certain amount of criteria in as to where you end up in the lineup waiting for this assistance.
Yeah, how you prioritize.
How you prioritize it. But the part that interests me the most is that, and obviously I didn't question it at Finance Committee because I didn't understand the severity of this line item budget. But the amount that is allocated for the next 2 years is $300,000. Now, OC, I don't know how often you get out, but I get out quite often, and I see a lot of people. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people who are in dire situations that quite find themselves in that kind of scenario where they don't have the finances and they're having difficulties with their homes for some way or shape or form. And when I thought about $300,000 for 2 years, as a matter of fact, I probably shouldn't say 2 years because the last figure I got was $300,000 for the budget year. And I don't know if they broke that down just for 1 year or for the whole budget cycle now, which is actually 2 years. One would assume that it's 2 years. And if anybody who's listening who's a part of that department want to call and clarify, I'll be happy to be corrected. But I'm going to assume that that means for the 2 year budget cycle. So that's what we're dealing with now.
Do you know the figures that were previous prior to that?
I need to find out as well. But to have a mere $300,000 to assist Caymanians with home repairs that create difficulties of living for them, I think is a drop in the bucket. If we remember, the Honorable McKeever Bush actually had to, the problem was so severe at one stage that he even offered up a program to try to get a lot of these homes fixed. And I think that had to do with the 4 Cayman Alliance deal. And now plenty of people may critique how that all went down. But we're not going to, I don't think people would discredit the fact that there was a need for it. And there continues to be a need for it because there's continuously having to see many Caymanians who cannot afford to live up to a standard in the country today because we're being marginalized. And what I'm seeing a lot of...
But it shouldn't be something that you have to repeat. if you've done it, if you've done the repairs before and if they're done satisfactorily, then that sort of like sets those persons aside that you don't have to go back to them and do it again.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. But let's say, for instance, I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a 70-year-old woman who owns her own home, luckily has a piece of land still in Cayman Islands, and her roof starts to leak. Let's say government assist them. Okay, we got a contractor. The contractor came out, $5,000 to fix the leak, right? But the next day, her windows break, or there's a crack in her wall and her plumbing goes bad. She doesn't have any children. She needs to get that fixed again. So there's always, unfortunately, this is the thing about development in your nation. There's always going to be people who are in need. And how you handle and how you treat people who are in need tells you how you are and how you see your people. And the truth is, the way we help those who are in need is disgusting. We do not live up to the mark. That's why we have people from BBC coming here laughing at us saying, oh, we depend on charities to deal with the stuff that we need to address. We should be ashamed of ourselves. Anyway, this $300,000 mark is an indication of how we see as a priority to help these individuals.
How much of it has been used so far?
I'm trying to get all that information.
It's quite possible that it may not be used too.
No, but let me add another.
So that $300,000 may still be sitting there. And
let me add another line to the story then.
Okay.
According to what I understand, there's over 100 applications awaiting, pending to get assistance. And even if their repairs was a mere $2,000, that would eat at that budget quite quickly. And the reason I say that is because of the procurement process. Now, it's not like, well, boy, back in the day, we probably can call him a handyman around the corner and say, well, boy, he'll do it for a $5,000 contract job with a company. He would do it for $2,000. But now, as a result, we have to go through a contract. We have to get a company. And the more middlemen involved, the higher the cost. So $300,000 isn't going to go very far for the need that is out there. And we can tell that there's hundreds of people waiting around for this assistance. I know we have a call.
Yeah, let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Brian. I hope what I say not going to offend anyone. I just want to ask, do you know how many people are unemployed right now in Cayman and how many of them are workable? Do you have any idea how many is workable? They use the word workable, which I don't think is very, very disrespectful.
Employable.
Employable, yes. Employable.
Well, I don't think there's a differentiation between how many people are employable to those who are employable, but I think the last figure was 4.7 of unemployment, right? That's my recollection to the last figure, and it's expected to go up.
So what if that figure be like how much thousand? 2,500 people, 3,000 people?
I'm assuming that figure as to be of the population, and we're just around.
I think it's less than 2,000 persons.
Less than 2,000.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, we will always have unemployment, and we as Caymanians, when we go to look at jobs these days, we got to really bite our tongue before we open our mouth sometimes when our bosses tell us what to do and what not to do. Because we got this thing that I'm a Caymanian, you can't send me nowhere. Yes, I can send you somewhere. I can send you home with a half a paycheck or a 1 month paycheck. You understand? So we need to come out of that low mentality that I'm going to go to work and whatever it takes. I had to crawl if I could walk. So let me go and crawl again to get where I want to get. You understand? We got a problem with attitudes and kicking off, but I'm a Caymanian. Sure, we are Caymanians, but we don't have to sit out on a job when you go to a job. And then when jobs are becoming redundant, most of the time they are Caymanians, and I have gotten that position already, and it's the Caymanians who is losing the jobs, and that is from day one, because they look at those that are on work permit, they're like more assets to the business than those that are Caymanian and may not have the higher position that these are the ones that the work permit has. So, the scale has the way. The scale will never be out level. In employment. We can keep fighting for jobs for Caymanians, but we as Caymanians need to get out there too and say, you know what, we're gonna work. I mean, Mr. Brian, when I drive around town as a taxi driver and see people hanging around from street to street, they're out there as winos. They can find money. They can bum you for Caymanians, we need to change our behavior, come off with an attitude train, respect where you go to work, and we can only climb the ladder if we allow ourselves to climb the ladder. Nobody can climb it for us. So, and another thing, Mr. Brian, we have to be careful when we get on air and talk about holding the work permit people with a little leash and so forth, because then when the employees hear that, they do have no interest in hiring the Caymanians too, because they hold every thing against us, and the more we say negative things, they're going to hold that against us, and we need to come out of that. So I don't, and Mr. OC, I'm driving through Boston town. I never see more garbage in my life. I don't believe this.
Yeah, I'm seeing it now as I ride around. I'm seeing the garbage stacked up, as well. Yeah.
But Brian, all I can tell you, keep fighting. But you got a tough road to go. But don't let nobody stand in the corner. Just keep fighting.
Thank you so much,
Take care,
Cora.
and y'all have a great one. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we're going to take a break now, and then we'll come back after Mr. Brown. Folks, please stay tuned for the record. I'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We have one WhatsApp message, and that person says that they reside in the sister islands. They have been submitting applications for position as a room attendant in Grand Cayman, and those places that they have submitted applications to didn't even have the decency to send a reply, even to acknowledge the receipt of the application, much less anything as well. And we do hear, people, complain, about that as well. I hear stories about them, in government. They used to have something called File 13. Goes in File 13. Nobody sees it. You never see it again. And I hear stories about, applications being crumpled up and thrown in the garbage. As well. But
not. I mean, sorry for laughing because it's not even a joke. But that File 13 theory is definitely real.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a little story about a company that a long time ago, a friend of mine told me about. They made an application to a company that their mother used to be the cleaning services for. Mm-hmm. So the mother would go and clean in the evenings after the office was shut down, and the mother said, well, why don't you go apply for this place? It's a really good company, and mommy works in the cleaning and stuff. So the son gets up the Monday and gets his suit on and his tie and everything and goes down, drops off. I would like to drop off my resume because I would like to be a part of this firm. And they took it. I'm not sure if it's a woman or a man. But later on that evening, when the mother went to clean, she found her son's application in the garbage.
Wow.
Yeah. That's real. That's not a joke story. That's a real story that happened here in Cayman Islands. But that's the realities that we're facing with the growing the economy that we have. And, there's benefits to having a multicultural growth. We're a bit of a melting pot here in Cayman Islands, and it brings a lot of advantages, but a lot of disadvantages as well. And we're taking a lot of the city style approaches to urbanized approach to this little island that we have, and we still have a lot of moderate, slower approaches to how we deal with each other, as opposed to the fast-paced, non-caring type of approach that we're adopting. So the merger of those two worlds, we're having a problem with the transition, and I don't think we're doing very well with the transition. A lot of people are being left behind. But we have to monitor it, and by all means, the last caller said that, there's a lot of Caymanians out there who just not wanting to do their part and don't want to work hard, and they're lazy and they're begging money and all that. Yeah, and you're 100% right, caller. And thank you for calling in and giving me the little support at the very end there. But I want to say that in most cases when we have these discussions, we're not talking about those who don't want to do no better. I didn't come on here to talk about them who are bumming or who are in the corner and really don't want to do work. I ain't got no time for them. And most people Most people know that. I'm talking about those who actually do want to work, who you don't see on the corner, that you don't see a part of the stats, because they got so much pride to say, listen, I'm going to figure it out on my own, and I'm going to try. But they're getting to that stage now where they don't know what else to do, and they're coming to the representative. But I know we have a call.
Yeah, 2 callers, actually. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you. Orman here.
Mm-hmm.
Just quickly, pertaining to what that last lady caller said. Mr. Bryan, I want you to know that I am on the same page with you, but I need to say publicly this morning, I know personally some big, able, hard-back men. Not even, they say they're Caymanians, but they're not even from Cayman. They get their rent paid, they get food stamps, and also everything is free. And every time I see those people, if they not got a beer in the hand, they're asking for money to buy one. And this is the thing that grieves me as a Caymanian, started working at 14 years old. I know where I am coming from, as well as other people, like Mr. Connor as well, and probably yourself as well, I know. But these people that come in here, not just Caymanians, they take advantage of the situation. And I am sure, and I will say, that needs to be highly looked into, that they can get out there and find a job, and they give you some excuse about they can't find a job. They do not want to do anything except hang up around the shoreline or something where they can shoot the bull all day, and there's someone else that is, selling blood and tears to make a living, and they got all this time on their hands with all of their muscular build and everything else, It really, really irritates me to see what happens. So I just thought I would pass that on, and I hope, and I think you will look into that as well and see what can be done about that.
Okay.
So thank you very much, gentlemen. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you very much, caller. And I must say, Mr. Bryan did mention the fact that there are people out there who simply don't want to work as well. So he did acknowledge that fact. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning,
morning,
Opie,
ma'am.
and good morning, Mr. Bryan.
Good morning.
I'm Shirley Schmid from West Bay. Now, the lady I'm going to speak about just need to have. She's 87 years old, and I'm going to say her name right out because
Unless she's given you, unless she's given you permission to do so, I wouldn't call her.
See, she calls on me for everything, including her doctor's appointment. She has a big family. She has 2 mental sons. One is living with her. She's 87 years old. She has a son that has, I don't know really what he has, because he's bent to the ground, you can say, to the ground, and he has a case worker, but nothing is done about him. He's been working up till now, up till this thing has happened to him, for years and years, and family comes by and
Caller, we're almost out of time, so I need you to get to the point as quickly as you can, please.
The point is, she needs to have a something that she can get out her door with. She has her own home. She lives in West Bay, and if anybody wants to know who this lady is, like I said, I would have called her name because she depends on me and another cousin a lot. She can't depend on her family. She needs a ramp built so she can get out of her doors.
Okay. Can you do you want to leave your contact number in the event that someone needs to get in touch with you in that regard?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
I'd just like to, before you do that, I'm assuming you're going to leave it with Miss Susan when we go off air, but one of the things I was just suggesting just now is that there's monies available within the budget for situations like that, and you need to contact the needs assessment unit on her behalf, because there are monies. They just have to put a priority on it, and if the seriousness of the situation are like what you highlighted, then she can be a matter of priority. So I would advise you to do that.
Yeah, good point.
My goodness, Kenneth. She's with the needs assessment now.
Well, but was there an application to say you want
Requesting
assistance for housing repairs? Because most times people don't realize that the application has to go through the needs assessment unit first to assess her financial position for her to be considered for the home repairs first. So she may be getting assistance financially for food or light or water, those kinds of things. But you have to also tell that person within the needs assessment unit that you also would like them for the consideration for home repairs, and that would be one of them.
Well, I thank you, Kenneth, but I want people to know the condition of this, her son that is nearly bent to the ground. He is in his 50s, but he has worked. He has worked very hard, and now he has a caseworker, but obviously this man is not doing anything for this boy. I have worked with this young man, I would have to call him, and his name is After. And then she has a mental one laying there all day long looking at her. She is 87, a widow, and it's.
And you said there's a case worker. Can I assume that case worker actually visits the location, goes to the house?
Visits the location.
And hasn't taken note of the fact that that she needs to, if she's bound, wheelchair bound, that she needs to have a ramp there.
She's not wheelchair bound.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
She's 87, but she has arthritis in her arms. She's a diabetic. She has worked all of her working days up until she was 70, 65, 70, in condos, in hotels. So that would tell you.
Yeah.
She has her own home, but she just needs a ramp built. Now, her son that I'm telling you, if you see him, you would have to cry. You would have to cry.
Unfortunately, we have to leave the caller there. We want to thank you very much, caller, for that. And sorry that we really couldn't get you to go into further detail into it as well. But, feel free to call back at another time. And you please leave the number with Ms. Susan as well. Mr. Brian, closing comments.
Thank you, Mr. Corner. It was a pleasure yet again to be here on the show. I thank you for the opportunity every time. I want to thank the listening audience and those who are also participating by calling in. The next time will be 2 weeks from now, Wednesday. And actually, believe it or not, that's the first day of Parliament, I think.
Okay.
The 27th. Today is the
6th.
So 2014 plus 6 is 21. Nope. So
it's going to be the 20th.
It's going to be the 20th. Yeah. Well, but that works out perfect because I can talk about what my motion is the very first motion that will be up in respect to opposition members, private members' motions. So I'll be talking about that, and it has to do with pensions, deductions, and then being able to use your pensions to pay off home mortgages and the like.
Okay.
So I'll leave that there. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I want to say to everybody who's listening, God bless you and have an amazing day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown, for that. Very quickly, I'm going to use a few minutes, and hopefully we can go into this in detail on Friday, depending on what agenda the opposition has. But you heard me speak earlier about the UK's Parliament Joint Select Committee on Human Rights and the British Nationality Act. And there is a proposal for a British Nationality Act 1981 remedial order to take place. Now, a remedial order is something different from amending the primary legislation, which would take a much longer period of time to be done. and it is the government's response to the declaration of incompatibility made by the Supreme Court in the case of Johnson versus Secretary of State for the Home Department. The Supreme Court found that the British Nationality Act was incompatible with Article 14, which is the principles of non-discrimination, read with Article 8, the rights of private and family life of the European Convention on Human Rights, in that it imposed a good character. This is the British Nationality Act now imposes a good character requirement on individuals who would, but for their parents' marital status, have automatically acquired citizenship at birth. Supreme Court made a declaration of incompatibility accordingly, and I'll get into those details in terms of what they mean by that they would have but for their parents' marital status have automatically acquired status. Now, I'm saying this in regards, this is something, again, that the Cayman Islands government, the people of the Cayman Islands, need to be extremely attentive to any changes to the British Nationality Act. Why? Well, in our Constitution, we did have for qualifications for an elector that you had to be a British overseas territory citizen by virtue of a connection with the Cayman Islands. We removed that from the 2009 Constitution, so you no longer have to be a British overseas territory citizen. More importantly, though, there are two provisions in our immigration law in relation to being a British overseas territory citizen. One has to do with your qualifications to apply for Caymanian status, and if you're a British overseas territory citizen, have resided here for a period of time, if you have been here for 5 years, 15 years immediately preceding your application for Caymanian status, then it helps you to get it. If not, you have to have it for at least 5 years before you can apply. So two ways. So, the acquisition of Caymanian status affected in terms of you being a British overseas territory citizen. For permanent residency, and I don't have to paraphrase this one because I may have gotten the other one in relation to status a little bit wrong with the 15 and 5 years, but I'll correct that on Friday as well. But for permanent residence or legislation, the immigration law says a person who is a British overseas territory citizen by virtue of a connection with the islands, by registration, by entitlement under the British Nationality Act 1981 or any act preceding, amending, or replacing that act shall, don't say may, shall have the right to remain permanently in the islands and shall cease to have such right, and tells you how you can lose it as well. But if you are a British overseas territory citizen by virtue of a connection with the Cayman Islands, by registration, by entitlement, you get permanent residence. We have to carefully monitor what the UK are going to be doing in terms of amending the British Nationality Act. Otherwise, we have to seriously, if it means that it's going to be more relaxed and it's going to be easier for people to acquire British overseas territory citizenship, then we need to consider whether we want to remove those provisions, just like we did from the Constitution in relation to qualifying as an elector, remove it in relation to the acquisition of status, remove it in relation to the acquisition of permanent residence. We don't know. Maybe the UK will allow for those amendments. Maybe they won't, because bear in mind now, they can disallow any legislation that we pass locally. I will leave you with that thought for us to continue to discuss it further. Folks, I want to thank you for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension for the record into your homes, into your vehicles, as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want or even those who crave. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these. Oh, join Sterling DNA Banks at 12 noon for a talk today as well. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three beautiful, wonderful Cayman Islands.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.